I'm Andrew Scott. Back with me this morning's ECR Chief Exec, Andrew Haythorpe. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning, Andrew. Great to be here.
And good to be speaking on video this time, Andrew. Look, we wanted to squeeze in a quick catch up before the long bank holiday weekend. We had the announcement yesterday around Adam stepping up to an exec role. Tell us a bit more about it. You were a big driving force behind this. What's the significance? What does it mean for ECR?
Well, with my recent visit to Victoria and spending the time with Adam, it became very clear that Adam's technical knowledge and attention to detail and management and passion, and especially passion for finding gold, just really stood out. So I certainly was very convinced and very enthusiastic to really acknowledge what Adam's done for the company, during some difficult times over the last 12 months, and also acknowledge, his technical prowess in terms of what he can do for the company moving forward. So I just really felt it was a win-win for Adam and for the company to really recognise and encourage Adam in that manner. And then, of course, the idea is not to just restrict Adam in terms of Victoria only or Victoria, Queensland only, but also talking with Adam, I've suggested, well, look, we should be reviewing new gold opportunities, anything that we think has the potential for million-ounce type discoveries. I really think that should be part of our core activity moving forwards. So there's a sort of a step up as well in terms of responsibility and also, of course, global. So whilst we have a very dominant Australia focus as we sit here today, we are actually reviewing the Philippine project. So we've just completed a technical review of the Philippines that's going to be presented to us by the Filipino geologists and management tomorrow. And of course, I wanted Adam to be, properly involved in assessing that and the opportunity in the Philippines and weighing it up against what we have currently in Victoria and Queensland. So I think it's a very balanced and mature approach for the company to appoint Adam, and I'm very glad that he accepted the position and seems to be delighted with it.
You bring up the Philippines, Andrew, so we may as well have a quick chat there. What's your initial view?
Well, look, I think I've had some preliminary emails and results and information come through just this week on the Philippines. So that will be presented to us, I think tomorrow. We're scheduled for the presentation. And then in turn, I'll be looking to discuss with the board of directors what I think we should do in terms of recommendations moving forwards on the Philippines. I could perhaps share one comment, which I think most shareholders are aware of, is the Philippines has a colourful history in terms of mining, and especially open cut mining moratoriums and such like. And the lease does have about a year, just over a year left to run up there in the Philippines, and then we have to go through a renewal process again. So I would say that does weigh heavily on my mind in terms of the recommendations that I'd be making to the board. And then, of course, depending on how the board feels, what our strategy will be in the Philippines moving forwards and what we recommend to shareholders effectively.
I was speaking with Adam last night. He's expecting all going to plan. He's expecting some assays back in the next couple of days from Bayliston, potentially from some of those visible gold holes. Clearly, the backlog here with assay turnaround has been frustrating.
Yes, Australia is still in this sort of strange world of if you have COVID contact or any sort of test positive, you get a week off work, basically. And so I'm getting the feeling that certain areas of the workforce, 30 or 50% of people are having a week off. And doesn't seem to be restricted to 1 week only. So that does really create this strange market of a very artificial labour shortage. So that means that we've got a backlog in terms of assays. The great news with Adam and the work that we're doing and the drilling and so on, of course, is there's two sort of reliefs, if you like, to that, with the lengthy delays on formal cutting of core and then assays being returned formally, a few months down the track. We're drilling essentially high grade, quartz veins and structures, and often between Adam and the drillers, they're very good at spotting, visible gold or mineralization in the drill holes. So at least as an interim, we can prioritize which samples we want to specifically try and rush through the lab. And secondly, of course, for the time being, at least, we can record it as VG, visible gold in the structure. And then from a geological point of view, that allows Adam then and us to plan the next sort of round of drilling and get on with the job in any event, because eventually this situation I mentioned earlier with COVID will sort of self-correct. I mean, it can't go on forever.
One of the areas creating a bit of interest, Blue Moon.
No, Blue Moon is very interesting because it's one where we got good grades over 2 meters of drill intercept as opposed to 20 centimeters or 50 centimeters. So Blue Moon's kind of got more of that potential width. It's also got a very strong antimony association with the mineralisation, which, you know, some of the more famous gold mines in Victoria do have that strong antimony association as well. So there's some very sort of favourable attributes to it. So it's nice to see some decent width, which of course with those widths, you know, 2 meters is kind of not a minimum mining width, but it's a comfortable minimum mining width, if I can call it that, which then has implications for dilution and effective recovery grade. And then of course the other good thing about Blue Moon is that antimony association. So there's a greater opportunity for us in terms of exploration and really getting a feeling further along strike. Are there any further soil antimony anomalies? Then there might be indicative of further gold mineralisation in areas which we currently don't know about. So we do have a technique that instead of waiting weeks or months for assays, with a handheld sort of assay technique, we can get results in 2 or 3 days without any stress, which is phenomenal. That gives you enough data to say, well, here's a zone or a corridor that looks interesting. Let's then start the process for applying for drill approvals, et cetera, et cetera. So Blue Moon has the width sort of characteristic, some very nice grades, you know, from previous drilling, has that antimony association, which now gives us the opportunity to really follow further off into the bush and just see if we've got, you know, a lot more than just a couple of 100 meters of strike length that we currently know about.
How soon would you like us to be out there putting some initial holes in?
Oh, look, I think last I spoke with Adam, the expectation was probably about 6 weeks, I think, to get the approvals process done for the drilling. He's got the drill collars planned. We actually, that was one of the photos that we took out in the bush that day when we're just looking at they looked like a paddock, but it was a paddock with gold underneath it. So hopefully it'll be something like 6 weeks and we might have the drill rig on there starting to drill. And again, with those sort of grades and antimony mineralisation, fingers crossed, we'd hope to be able to see something as we drill and, you know, then have at least some encouragement as we move forwards and move northwards along strike.
Given the nature of the mineralisation in Victoria, what's ECR working towards there? What's the end game?
Well, I think the end game is 2 things. One is obviously exploration in terms of defining resources and sort of setting things up for potential reserves and mining, you know, long-term vision for mining. That's a value add path, which of course gold explorers become gold miners and go through that process. But also at the same time, you do have the opportunity to do deals or to sell assets or to rationalise things or work with neighbours to expand your footprint in terms of ground and property. So what I would say is I think we just will keep our eyes open and our ears equally open and listen for opportunities where if we can see an opportunity to add value to shareholders by heading this way, that's what we'll do. If we think it's better to go this way, then that, of course, is also what we'd do. But I really do think the exploration techniques that Adam was showing me that was working in Victoria there a couple of weeks ago, they are extremely encouraging. That's a real breakthrough in science, in my view. That's a real opportunity for the company to get as much of that sort of work done quickly, extremely cheaply. And then we're going to end up with a map full of images, hopefully, where we've got these antimony anomalies and things to go and propose further drilling. And of course, the bigger they are, the better.
Something you mentioned on our call last week and many investors picked up on, your excitement around
Yes.
Queensland and the potential. What are the plans? When are we going to have some boots on the ground there?
I think we're currently working on getting access, which I would say Queensland in terms of access to the land with farmers or cockies as they're called up there, who control vast, you know, tracts of land, literally. They're generally speaking, they're much easier to work with. They operate cattle stations. You know, there's very little infrastructure. It's very remote country. So we're working through that process. And again, I think we might be looking at something of the order of 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, in terms of access and getting just the administrative ducks lined up in terms of the processes. And, we're well advanced in talking to geological and field crews in far north Queensland, with a large degree of enthusiasm to get them out there as soon as possible and start sampling. Well, let's go and see what's out there.
From your early analysis and understanding, how's the structure, the mineralization different in Queensland?
Okay, geological environment. That's just a good question, Andrew. You've got multiple geological environments that host world-class gold ore bodies. In detail, they're actually quite different from the Victorian slate belt gold ore bodies that we're focused on, in Victoria currently. In general sense, though, you've got, for want of a term, very large porphyry or breccia type structures like Kidston gold mine or Mount Lation gold mine, which they're just literally massive blobs of mineralisation at 1 or 2 or 3 grams a tonne, which make for world-class multi-million ounce type deposits. Separately from that, though, you also have epithermal veins, which are more the narrow sort of quartz vein type setting, a little bit like Victoria. But, and again, they can be 20 centimetres thick or they can be 20 metres thick. Hemlo is a famous one in North America. That's an epithermal gold mine that was mined and discovered 30 years ago. So again, and in the case of like Pajingo, Viranansi, Krakow, Charters Towers, of course, historically, a lot of high-grade narrow veins in the Charters Towers district. You've also got that style of mineralisation. So it's sort of, I really find it a very attractive piece of ground with the visible gold anomalies that have been recorded from the previous sampling, because we simply don't know what is in Damdara Hills. And it's really about getting up Damdara Hills and seeing what is it that's shedding the gold.
Given the forward strategy, Andrew, that you've outlined, the potential in Queensland, what we're up to in Victoria, why should people take a look at ECR now, especially given where the share price is?
I'm a great fan, of course, and many of us are, of Warren Buffett. And I think Warren Buffett was always very, very articulate in GARP. And GARP is growth at the right price. So yes, you need growth, but it has to be at the right price. You don't want to pay too much, obviously, as an investor. Well, at 1p, I don't think we're paying too much for the share price in ECR Minerals today, with the market and what's happened with the market correction and the lack of, or the drop in risk money in the share market. So we've got the right price, and I just see there's lots of growth opportunity for us in the existing portfolio of assets. And then, of course, a big part of the reason why I'm here today, Andrew, and really enjoying my time with ECR Minerals, is the opportunity to look beyond our borders and look for other growth opportunities where we think there's a good commercial business opportunity to start off with either an idea, a concept, or an anomaly, or a stream sediment, or a drill hole result of visible gold, or whatever that piece of data is. And then I think the company has brilliant skills and people involved where we can very much just look at these things and say, okay, well, let's have a look. Is it going to be 200 meters of strike length, or is it going to be 5 kilometers of strike length? Is it a big structure? Is it a small one? Is it a porphyry style mineralization? Is it a breccia? Is it something else? So I think very quickly, without wasting any time or money, we can come to a view to say, okay, well, let's put some risk money on this. Let's drill it or explore it. If we're happy with the results or encouraged based on alteration or specific mineralization, you keep going because that's geotechnically very valid and proper science. If, however, it's completely, it's just not what you want for whatever reason, don't get wedded to it. Don't fall in love with it. Move on to the next opportunity.
Is your time at ECR so far living up to your earlier expectations?
Actually, it's exceeding it in a sense, because certainly, as I indicated, I think last time we spoke, having just gone through the preliminary data, or the very old preliminary data on Queensland, I was just astonished as to the quality of land from a geological perspective. The fact that I'm roughly familiar with that part of Australia just because of my own personal geological background, and the fact that I don't know anyone who's ever been up there and had a look.
Andrew, good to see you this morning. Thanks for your time.
Andrew, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure.